He woke up from his coma with no recent memories, but found a nurse by his side and a baby in his arms. And when he saw that little locket, everything stopped. Who was that child? Why did it bear his initials? And why did that woman, a stranger until then, seem to know its soul better than anyone else? Get ready for a story that begins with abandonment and a storm, but blossoms with discoveries, secrets, and life-changing decisions. A narrative where blood doesn't always define family, but who chooses to stay when everyone else leaves. You're about to understand that true love sometimes comes as a surprise. The rain was falling with unusual force that night. The streets, almost deserted, reflected the few headlights that dared to cross the dawn. Lucia, the night nurse, was crossing the hospital's side corridor when she heard a sound. A cry. Weak, irregular, as if hope itself was hesitating to continue. She froze for a second. The sound was coming from outside. Her heart racing, she ran to the service entrance. As she opened the door, the cold wind hit her, bringing with it the clearest of cries. Between two wet cardboard boxes, covered with a makeshift cloth, was the baby. Lucia fell to her knees. Her hands, experienced and trained for emergencies, became shaky at the sight. "You're freezing. My God." She wrapped him in her apron and brought him to her breast. The baby was crying loudly now, as if it knew it had been found. Lucia looked around. No one. Just her and that little abandoned miracle. Picking up the cloth more carefully, she saw a note pinned to it. "He deserves to live better than I could. Please take care of him." And next to it, an old simple locket with the initials CB engraved by hand. Lucia frowned. Those letters. She knew them, or at least she felt she did. The name of a patient, someone from the executive ward. She didn't know, but something about that piece awoke a dormant memory. Running through the corridors back to the neonatal ICU, she screamed for help. "We have an abandoned baby. I need support now." The staff rushed to her aid. Within minutes, the baby was warm, monitored and safe. Lucia, however, remained motionless, her eyes fixed on the little body wrapped in wires and sensors. A colleague touched her shoulder. "Lucia, are you all right?" She nodded slowly. He was outside, alone. With that note, and a locket with the initials CB. "You're going to report him as an abandonment case, right?" Lucia hesitated. "Of course, but until they sort it out, I'm keeping him. You know that's not common." "He's not common." Later, alone in the restroom, Lucia examined the locket again. She ran her fingers over the initials as if she could extract some truth from them. "Who are you, little one?" she murmured. "And why does this locket look so familiar?" The baby's cry sounded again from the ICU. Lucia stood up, her tiredness evaporating. "You're not alone anymore, little one. I promise." And without realizing it, by walking through that door, Lucia had already taken the first step towards changing not only the baby's life, but her own. The heart monitor pulsed quietly, marking the steady slowness of a body that seemed to have been asleep for centuries. Charles had been in a coma for 2 weeks. No relatives visited him. No friends asked. Only the doctor's shifts and the cold lights of the ICU filled the space. Lucia entered the room with slow steps. In her arms, the baby slept, warmed by a pale blue blanket. "Good morning, Charles," she said softly, even though she knew he wouldn't hear. It was strange. Ever since she had found the baby, something in her had drawn her to that room. And now, more than ever, she felt that their stories were linked by something invisible. She approached the bed and looked at his face. Charles looked serene, firm features, a peaceful expression, but the air of someone who had been carrying secrets for too long. "Did you know that outside a child was left with a locket bearing your initials, CB, Charles, Bruno?" She smiled, skeptical of the coincidence, but when she saw the watch on his wrist, she froze. Engraved discreetly on the side were the same letters, CB, in a handwriting that looked as if it had been done by hand. Lucia moved closer. She took out the locket she kept in her pocket and compared it to the watch. They were identical. The same style of engraving, the same line. "It can't be," the baby mumbled, and she settled him better in her arms. She turned to Charles. "Are you trying to tell me something? Is this baby your son, or your grandson? No, you don't look that old. Brother, nephew?" She sighed. She was getting carried away with assumptions. But why then would those initials be on him? The monitor continued to beep. Charles remained motionless. But Lucia swore that the air in the room had changed, as if there was a tension, a magnetic field connecting everyone there. Lucia sat in the armchair next to the bed and watched the two of them. The baby, so small, so vulnerable. Charles, motionless, but with a past that seemed to cry out in silence. If he is your son, who was his mother? And why did she leave him? She lightly touched Charles's arm. "Maybe you're waiting for someone to come back, but maybe what you're waiting for is already here." Before leaving the room, Lucia took one last look at both of them. "I don't know what's going on here, but I promise I'll find out." And as she closed the door, she had the strange feeling that Charles had heard everything, even though her body insisted on sleeping. The muffled sound of papers being turned over filled the hospital's small records room. Lucia, with the baby asleep in a baby carriage beside her, was going through files with care and growing tension. It wasn't common for a nurse to get involved like this, but nothing had happened since the night she found the baby. She had gotten permission to review old records because of a patient with no family identification, Charles. Officially, his file was sealed, but administrative and medical details were available, and that was all she needed for now. She found what she was looking for in a discreet folder hidden among other bulkier folders. Full name, Charles Bruno. Businessman, single. No registered children. But there was something in the emergency contact section that caught his eye, a name scribbled with force. Clara. Clara, he muttered. He looked for cross-referenced records with that name. Clara Bruno. Younger sister. Record out of date for 6 years. No recent contact. Missing or just erased from his life. Lucia turned back to the baby and gently held his little arm. He stirred, his eyes still closed. "You know who your mother is, don't you? And she knew to leave you with me." At that moment, the head of the ICU entered the room abruptly. "Lucia, what are you doing with those files?" Lucia stood up quickly. "Investigating something important. The baby we found could be connected to Charles." The boss crossed her arms. "You're going beyond your remit. What if it's true? What if he's the father of this child? Do you have proof?" Lucia took the locket out of her pocket. "This. And the watch Charles wears has the same engraving, the same initials. And now that name, Clara. It's all starting to make sense. It could be a coincidence. Or it could be the start of something this baby needs to know. I just want to make sure it has a real chance." The boss watched her for long seconds, then sighed. "You have 3 days. If you don't find anything concrete, we'll hand the baby over to the adoption authorities." Lucia nodded. 3 days are more than enough. Back in Charles' room, she moved the baby closer to the bed once more. "You're listening to all this, aren't you? I don't know if it's your son, your nephew, but you're connected. And I won't stop until I understand." She noticed something new, the slight movement of a finger, quickly, almost imperceptible, but real. "Charles?" Silence, but her heart raced. "You're trying to come back, aren't you?" The baby whimpered, and Lucia rocked him gently, without taking her eyes off Charles. The mystery deepened, and without realizing it, she was already at the center of a story that would change the lives of everyone there, including her own. Lucia entered Charles' room with the baby in her arms. She had been talking to him as if he were awake for days, even if there was no answer. But that morning, there was something different in the air, a subtle energy, a vibration that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. The baby, awake and calm, watched Charles' face with innocent curiosity. Lucia pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down slowly. You don't know who I am, Charles, but I found him, in the rain, alone. And since then, you've been here too, in silence. As if you were waiting for something. She positioned the baby next to Charles's arm, letting her small hands lightly touch the sheet. The contrast between the fragile fingers and the adult skin was almost symbolic. If he's your son, then he needs you. And if he's not, he needs someone. I'm trying, but I'm not everything he needs. He needs history, real history. Lucia took Charles's hand and spoke firmly. If you're still in there, if you still have something to say, now is the time. She didn't expect an answer. She had gotten used to the silence, but then something changed. A tear slowly fell from the corner of Charles's eye. Lucia went still. Charles, did you hear? The baby made a soft sound, as if responding to the tension in the room. Lucia carefully reached up, touched Charles's face with her fingertips, and confirmed what she had seen. The tear was there. Real, salty, human. She ran to call the ICU doctor. He reacted. A tear! I saw it. Minutes later, the team entered the room, checking vital signs, adjusting monitors. It's possible, said the doctor. Patients in a deep coma sometimes show involuntary reactions, but it could also be a sign of awakening. Lucia, standing next to the portable crib where the baby was resting, couldn't look away from Charles. That night, something stopped her from leaving. She stayed in her room, sitting down and dozing off next to her bed. At some point, between tiredness and silence, she heard a deep sigh coming from Charles. When she opened her eyes, she saw his hand move slightly. One finger, then another. His chest rose in a steadier breath. She jumped up and ran to the bedside. Charles? His eyes flickered open. Slowly they opened, cloudy, confused, but open. Lucia stood there, not breathing, and then his eyes fixed on the cradle, and for a second his expression changed. Recognition? Pain? It was impossible to tell, but one thing was clear. Charles had woken up, and everything was about to change. Charles blinked a few times, trying to process where he was. The brightness of the window, the soft noises of medical equipment, the smell of disinfectant. But what caught his attention most was the soft sound of a baby, and the face of a woman he had never seen before, with watery eyes and a restrained smile. You're in hospital, said Lucia, her voice calm. You've been in a coma for weeks. Charles frowned, his eyes heavy with confusion. Who are you? My name is Lucia. I'm a nurse. I looked after you. He slowly turned his head and saw the crib beside him. And him? Lucia hesitated. That baby was left on the hospital doorstep, with a locket. His initials were on it. CB. Charles stared at the baby for long seconds. Then he whispered, Clara. Lucia moved closer. Clara, that name's in your file. Sister? Charles closed his eyes, trying to recall distant images. Clara was my sister, but she disappeared years ago. She was pregnant. The last time I saw her, she told me she couldn't stay, that the baby's father couldn't know. And you didn't look for her? I did, for months, but she was gone. I thought she was dead. Lucia lowered her gaze. She might have left that baby here for you. No, I wouldn't have done that. Unless she was desperate. He turned his eyes to the baby again, now with visible emotion. That boy could be my nephew, or my son. Do you think he is? I don't know, but something about him pulls me in. Lucia took a deep breath. I found him in the rain, fragile, alone. Since then, he's changed me. Charles looked at her. For the first time, he noticed the tenderness in her voice, the silent strength of that woman. Why did you stay with me? Because no one else did. And because I felt that he and you were connected, and I couldn't ignore that. Silence. Then Charles said with difficulty, I want to get to know him. I want to try to understand. Lucia approached, took the baby on her lap, and placed him carefully next to Charles. The little one opened his eyes for a moment and instinctively grabbed the man's finger. Charles was paralyzed. Then tears silently fell. It's been a long time. No one has touched me like that. Without interest. Lucia smiled. Maybe this is the start of something new. He looked at her. Would you stay a little longer? Of course, as long as it takes. And in that hospital room, between the pain of the past and the uncertainty of the future, 3 lives began to intertwine roots, united by something stronger than logic, the need to love and be loved. Charles's discharge was discreet. No press, no fuss, no one from the family. Just Lucia, the baby, now called Gabriel, and the driver who was waiting to take them to the mansion, a place where, according to Charles, many rooms have forgotten how to live. Lucia hesitated as she walked through the wrought iron gate. It wasn't the kind of house she felt comfortable in, but the baby slept peacefully in her arms, and Charles, still moving slowly, seemed safer when she was around. You can stay in the guest room on the first floor. It's next to mine, he said, looking away. Are you sure you want me to stay? Charles nodded. I don't just want to, I have to. I don't know how to look after him on my own. And you've been more than a nurse. Lucia didn't reply immediately. She knew she was crossing a line, but the bond with Gabriel was too strong to pretend it didn't exist. And with Charles, there was something being born there, something that didn't fit into simple definitions. In the days that followed, the previously silent house took on new sounds, crying, restrained laughter, conversations around the table. Charles, previously reclusive, began to follow Gabriel's routine with a thrilled curiosity. He smiled at me today, he said one afternoon, as he watched the baby lying on the carpet. Did you smile back? Charles smiled. I think so. I'm learning. Lucia watched everything with a heart divided between care and fear. She was getting attached to Gabriel and to Charles, but she didn't know if this was a temporary home or a step into the abyss. One night, as they were putting Gabriel to bed, Charles approached slowly. Can I ask you something? Of course. Haven't you ever thought about having children? Lucia sighed. I have. But life didn't give me the space or security. And now, she looked at him in surprise. Now? I mean, if this moment with him, with us, makes you rethink that, Lucia smiled sadly. It makes me wish, but it also makes me afraid, because none of this was planned, and what comes as a surprise can also leave just like that. Charles lowered his eyes. I'm afraid too, but for the first time, I'm afraid of losing and not of getting involved. She came closer, touched his hand lightly. Then maybe we're starting the right way. With truth. That night, the mansion was silent, but it wasn't the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of peace. Lucia, alone in her room, watched Gabriel sleep. And for the first time in a long time, she felt that there, in that unlikely place, was something like home. The morning seemed ordinary, with the smell of fresh coffee filling the halls of the mansion. Gabriel played with his toys scattered around the living room, while Lucia organized some medical papers on the sofa. Charles, attentive, was reading a report in the armchair, but his gaze was divided between the documents and the baby's gestures. The doorbell rang. Lucia looked at Charles, who nodded slightly for the security guard to answer. A few seconds later, the man returned, tense. There's a woman at the door. She says she wants to speak to you. She says she's the baby's mother. The air changed. Lucia froze. Charles let the papers fall to the floor. What's her name? Asked Charles, his voice firm. Clara. Lucia felt the floor spin. She stood up on an impulse. Did she come back? Charles took a deep breath. Send her in. Clara appeared in the room with an unsettling presence. Her eyes were red, but her face was made up. Rehearsed elegance. She didn't look like a desperate mother. She looked like a woman with a plan. She ignored Lucia and approached Charles. I see you've taken good care of him. Why did you leave him outside a hospital? Charles asked bluntly. Clara feigned emotion. It was all very difficult. I had no way out, but I regretted it. I came back to take back what's mine. Lucia interjected. You didn't come back out of regret. You came back now that you know where he is. Clara looked at her with disdain. And what about you? Who are you anyway? I'm the one who was there when you weren't. Charles stood up. What exactly do you want, Clara? She was clear. I want my son back, or a settlement, a fair amount for his custody, and I'll disappear again. The silence in the room was piercing. You're asking for money in exchange for a baby? Charles asked, incredulous. I'm asking for compensation for everything I've been through, and you can pay me back. You always could. Lucia stepped forward. You're not thinking of his good. You're thinking of yourself. Clara laughed bitterly. And you're in love, aren't you? Do you think he'll choose you? Charles looked at Lucia, then at Gabriel, and finally at Clara. You're right. I have to choose, and I will. Lucia felt her heart stop for a second, but Charles turned to Clara. You gave him up, and now you want to trade it as if it were an object. I won't allow it. Then let's see who wins in court, Clara retorted. You can try, Charles said, but I have proof of the abandonment, and I have who was really here. Who really looked after him? Clara huffed and left without saying another word. The door slammed. Lucia, still in shock, sat up. Charles approached and took her hand. Are you with me on this? Lucia nodded silently. Her eyes watered. Then we'll fight together. For him, for us. The courtroom was silent. Charles sat with a firm posture, although his eyes showed fatigue. Lucia, next to him, held her hands tightly in her lap, her fingers intertwined. Gabriel, in another room, was waiting under the care of a social worker. Clara was on the other side, next to her lawyer, her face impassive and her gaze calculating. The judge was analyzing the documents handed over. The words echoed like cold metal hammers. Abandonment, neglect, custody, emotional protection. But what hurt Charles most was knowing that his bond with Gabriel had been built in silence, in the fragility of sleepless nights, and not on legal papers. When the judge asked him to speak, Charles stood up. Your Honor, I'm not just here as a businessman or a man of means. I'm here as someone who was in a coma and woke up with a new life in his arms. And I'm not talking about mine. I'm talking about his. He pointed to a photo of Gabriel displayed in the proceedings. That child was abandoned, shrouded in rain, in silence, and in a desperate plea for care. It wasn't the biological mother who responded to that request. It was Lucia. The judge watched him carefully. Clara crossed her arms. I know I don't have any proven blood ties yet, but ties, real ties, aren't in the blood. They're in the eyes. In the welcoming arms, in the words said at 2 a.m. to calm a cry. Lucia, her eyes watering, remained silent. I ask you to look beyond the origin. Look at the present, to the future that this child can have. The judge paused for a long moment, then asked for a preliminary ruling. Gabriel's provisional custody would remain with Charles and Lucia until Clara's background was fully analyzed. On the way out of the courtroom, Clara passed by them without saying a word. But the look in her eyes revealed that she knew. She had lost more than a case. Back at the mansion, the atmosphere was different. Clara had disappeared again, and with that, a weight seemed to have left the air. Charles and Lucia were sitting on the veranda, Gabriel playing on the rug in front of them. The sky had the golden hues of late afternoon. Do you think we're ready? Lucia asked. Ready for what? To be a family, officially. Charles took a small box out of his pocket. He opened it in front of her. Do you want to be his mother? With me, by your side? Lucia smiled, touched. I already am. But yes, with you, I want to be everything. 2 years later, Gabriel was running around the garden, and Lucia, with her slightly rounded belly, was watching him with affection. Charles approached and hugged her from behind. I never thought that waking up from a coma would be the beginning of my life. Lucia replied with a light kiss. Sometimes you have to sleep on the outside to wake up on the inside.